The mainstream broadcast had every camera angle, every replay tool, and every analytical resource available, and they still missed what was actually happening on that court. While the commentators were busy talking about storylines and narratives, something raw, something real, and something the entire WNBA ecosystem was completely unprepared for was unfolding right in front of them. A professional basketball game was being transformed into something else entirely. A statement, a warning, a declaration that the Indiana Fever are no longer the team that absorbs punishment and stays quiet about it. Brianna Stewart found out the hard way. A Liberty defender found out even harder. And by the time the final buzzer sounded at the Barclays Center, every single team on Indiana's schedule had received the same unmistakable message. Sophie Cunningham is back. Not just back from 9 months of grueling knee rehab. Not just back in the rotation. Back as the most physically imposing, most fiercely loyal, and most genuinely terrifying enforcer in the entire league. And the viral footage that hit the internet after this weekend's preseason matchup between the Indiana Fever and the New York Liberty just proved exactly why nobody in the WNBA wants to see her name on the opposing roster.
Hey, real quick, let me kill this sound because it got copyright music. You guys see that? Did y'all? And now she throwing up her hands. She's throwing up her hands like she ain't just damn me. Boom. Lead forward and assault Sophie Cunningham, bro. Dirty fucking play there. That was a dirty play. Now, it looked like the referee actually might call this. It says we need.
There is a specific kinds of basketball play that television producers hate. It does not involve a highlight reel dunk. It does not generate a clean, shareable clip. It happens off the ball, away from the primary action, in the spaces between possessions where the real physical chess match actually lives. And during Saturday's preseason matchup at the Barclays Center, one of those plays happened, got captured on raw fan footage, went absolutely nuclear across social media, and exposed something that the polished mainstream broadcast was never going to show you. Brianna Stewart, the face of the New York Liberty, the former MVP, the most celebrated player on one of the most celebrated rosters in the WNBA, made a move on Sophie Cunningham that immediately divided the entire basketball internet into two furious camps. As Cunningham was navigating the perimeter in a completely off-ball situation, Stewart stepped directly into her path. But this was not a clean, textbook basketball screen. Stewart's feet were actively moving outside the three-point arc. Her upper body weight shifted forward aggressively, and she extended her arm away from her torso, making heavy contact with Cunningham's chest area before immediately throwing both hands straight up into the air, looking directly at the referee with an expression that said, "This was a complete accident." The raw fan footage tells a completely different story. Frame by frame, the biomechanics of this play reveal exactly why it has generated such fierce debate across social media. The foot movement alone puts the legality of the screen in serious question. The forward lean of Stewart's entire upper body suggests this was not a stationary, passive basketball play. And the speed at which Stewart's hands shot up into the air after the collision suggests a level of situational awareness that does not exactly align with the accidental contact narrative. Now, to be completely fair, this is heavily debated territory. Some fans and analysts watching this footage believe this absolutely crosses the line into a non-basketball play. Others see it as the kind of aggressive, physical defense that defines high-stakes, playoff-level intensity. The referees on the floor made their call. But the court of public opinion, fueled by that viral fan footage, has been far less forgiving towards Stewart in the days since this game ended. What nobody is debating is how Sophie Cunningham responded. She absorbed the hit, kept her balance, and immediately started preparing for war.
So this is a slow motion version of it. So as you guys can see here, just look at it. Boom, bro. Boom. Just completely look at Brianna Stewart's face. And this is who we got in charge of negotiating the CBAs. Look at this. Like, how do something like this happens always?
What happened to Cunningham was not random. It was not an isolated moment of playoff-level physicality that simply got out of hand. When you watch the full, unedited fan footage of this game from start to finish, a very clear and very calculated defensive strategy begins to emerge from the New York Liberty's game plan. And that strategy had one specific target: Caitlyn Clark. The Liberty came into this preseason matchup with a straightforward mathematical reality staring them in the face. Indiana's transition offense, built around Clark's generational court vision and hyperspeed decision-making, is genuinely difficult to stop through conventional defensive means. You cannot simply scheme your way out of a problem that moves that fast and that efficiently. So, the Liberty made a different kind of calculation. They decided to get physical. They decided to test the referee's tolerance. And they decided to make Clark's life as uncomfortable as possible every single time she tried to navigate the half-court offense. The raw footage shows Liberty defenders actively hand-checking Clark on the perimeter, crowding her space, grabbing at her jersey, using their bodies to disrupt her rhythm before she even had the ball in her hands. This was a coordinated, deliberate approach designed around one cynical assumption: that the officials were simply going to allow it, that the whistles were going to stay in pockets, that Clark was going to have to fight through every single possession without any protection from the officiating crew. It is a strategy that several teams used against Clark throughout her rookie season, and to a devastating degree, it worked. The accumulation of that daily physical toll contributed directly to the soft tissue injuries that eventually ended her season after just 13 games. Teams around the league watched that happen and quietly filed it away as a viable blueprint. The Liberty arrived at the Barclays Center believing that blueprint was still valid. They forgot to account for one critical variable: one player who had spent 9 months in a rehabilitation facility, rebuilding a surgically repaired knee, thinking about exactly this kind of moment. One player who had watched Clark take those hits last season and made a very personal, very quiet promise about what she was going to do when she got back onto that court. Sophie Cunningham does not forget, and she does not forgive opposing defenders who decide to make Caitlyn Clark's life difficult.
Talking about right here. So this was Sophie here. But watch how this girl is hacking Caitlyn Clark. Watch this. Caitlyn Clark is getting hacked. Watch. Watch. Look at her hacking Caitlyn Clark all over. Now watch Sophie. Boom. Now, when Sophie did...
The moment the Liberty's defensive strategy became fully visible on the court, something shifted in Sophie Cunningham's body language. Anyone watching the raw fan footage closely enough could see it happening in real time. The way she started tracking defender movements off the ball, the way her positioning became more deliberate, more aggressive, more intentional with every passing possession. She was not just playing basketball anymore. She was enforcing a standard. And then came the sequence that broke the internet. Caitlyn Clark was driving the lane with her trademark fearlessness, attacking the paint against a Liberty defense that had been crowding and grabbing her all game. A Liberty defender was closing in hard on Clark's blind side, the exact kind of incoming contact that had caused so many problems for Clark throughout her rookie season. But before that defender could make contact, Sophie Cunningham came flying in from the weak side and set a screen that immediately became the most talked about play of the entire preseason. This was not a casual, half-hearted screen. Cunningham physically inserted her entire body between Clark and the incoming defender with a level of forceful precision that genuinely stunned the arena. She occupied the space completely. She absorbed the contact without flinching. She created a wall where there had been open lane a split second earlier, and the Liberty defender, upon feeling the full force of a perfectly legal, perfectly positioned Cunningham screen, threw both arms dramatically into the air and collapsed backward onto the hardwood, desperately selling the call to anyone who would listen. The contrast with the Stewart incident earlier in the game was immediate and impossible to ignore. Stewart hits Cunningham with a genuinely controversial elbow, throws her hands up, and acts innocent. A Liberty defender feels a clean, legal screen from Cunningham, throws her hands up, and collapses to the floor. Social media saw both clips side by side, and the reaction was instantaneous. The Bodyguard label spread across basketball Twitter, basketball Reddit, and every WNBA-focused corner of TikTok within hours. Fans were not just talking about Cunningham as a role player or an enforcer. They were talking about her as the singular reason the Indiana Fever's offensive engine is structurally protected in a way it simply was not last season. Brianna Stewart initiated the contact. Sophie Cunningham answered it in the most public way possible.
Sophie didn't look like she leaned into her, bro. Let me see. Nope. I don't think she did. I don't think. Oh, and old girl flopped. Look at this damn flop. She threw her arms up and everything. Now, we go back and look at what happened to Sophie. Like, people want to say Sophie did the same thing.
To truly understand the emotional weight of what Sophie Cunningham did at the Barclays Center on Saturday, you have to go back 9 months and sit with exactly what she was going through while the rest of the league was playing basketball without her. The MCL tear happened quickly, as catastrophic knee injuries always do. One moment, she was on the court doing what she does better than almost anyone else in the league. The next moment, she was on the floor, facing the brutal reality that her season was over and that the road back was going to be long, painful, and genuinely uncertain. Knee ligament injuries at the professional level are not simply a matter of rest and recovery. They require complete structural rebuilding. They demand daily commitment to a rehabilitation process that offers no guarantees about what the knee will feel like on the other side. And while Cunningham was grinding through that rehabilitation process, she was watching Caitlyn Clark absorb punishment on a nightly basis without adequate protection. She was watching veterans around the league test Clark's physicality with the confidence of players who knew the league's most exciting young franchise lacked its primary enforcer. She was watching the soft tissue injuries accumulate. She was watching the toll add up. And she was sitting in a rehabilitation facility, working on her knee, thinking about what she was going to do when she got back. The Indiana Fever front office eventually offered her a 1-year deal worth $665,000. By the financial standards of what she provides to that roster, that number is remarkably team-friendly. She signed it without hesitation, not because the money was right, because the mission was right, because being the enforcer for the greatest show in women's basketball was worth more to her than chasing a bigger payday somewhere else. Saturday, at the Barclays Center, was the answer to 9 months of questions. Would the knee hold up under game-speed physicality? Would the competitive fire still burn at the same intensity? Would the WNBA feel the return of its most ferocious screen setter? She went 5 of 8 from the field, scored 13 points, finished with a +8 rating, and spent the entire game physically reminding the New York Liberty that the Indiana Fever have a completely different identity now than they did when she was sitting in that rehab facility.
Look at Sophie. Sophie ain't flopped. She immediately, Brianna Stewart, a big gal. Look, she ain't throw her hands up. See, there's a big difference. Watch this one here. Look, she flopped. That was a half-second.
There is a specific kind of value that traditional basketball statistics were never designed to capture. You will not find it in the points column. You will not find it in the assists or rebounds categories. You will not find it anywhere in the advanced metrics that analysts use to evaluate player performance. But every coach, every general manager, and every veteran player in professional basketball understands exactly what it is and exactly how dramatically it changes the strategic landscape of a game. It is the enforcer effect. The enforcer effect is real, measurable in its consequences, and almost impossible to quantify in conventional basketball terms. It works like this. When an opposing defender knows that playing overly physical against a team's primary offensive weapon is going to result in immediate, equally physical consequences on the very next possession, that defender starts making different calculations. The hand checking becomes slightly less aggressive. The crowding of the perimeter becomes slightly less coordinated. The willingness to lean into contested situations becomes slightly less automatic. None of these individual adjustments are dramatic, but their cumulative effect across 40 minutes of basketball is enormous. Sophie Cunningham is the enforcer effect personified. Her screens operate on the very edge of what WNBA officials will accept. Some of them are going to draw technical fouls in regular season games when the officiating crew decides to tighten the standard. There are going to be moments this season where her aggression becomes a liability rather than an asset. But the alternative, allowing opposing defenses to physically dismantle Caitlyn Clark without consequences, is a dramatically worse outcome for the Indiana Fever. Because what happened last season proved the cost of operating without that deterrent. Clark took hits on a nightly basis. The soft tissue injuries accumulated slowly, and then all at once. And 13 games into what should have been the most celebrated rookie season in WNBA history, the Indiana Fever lost their franchise player to an injury that had been building since the first game of the season. Nobody is guaranteeing that having Cunningham healthy prevents every hard foul Clark absorbs this season. But having Cunningham healthy fundamentally changes the risk-reward calculation for every defender who considers initiating that contact. And in professional basketball, changing that calculation is worth more than almost any statistic you can put in a box score. After the final buzzer sounded at the Barclays Center and the Indiana Fever had their preseason victory secured, Sophie Cunningham went back to her New York hotel room and did something that perfectly encapsulated everything she represents to this franchise. She posted a TikTok. Standing in her hotel room, lip-syncing to "Here for the Party" by Gretchen Wilson, flexing the surgically repaired knee that 9 months ago had her sitting in a rehabilitation facility wondering about her future in professional basketball, and demanding dubs in the comments section with the energy of someone who had been waiting an entire year to feel this good again. That video went viral immediately. And not just within the WNBA fan base. It crossed over. It landed in corners of social media that do not normally pay attention to women's basketball. It generated the kind of organic, authentic engagement that no marketing team can manufacture and no PR strategy can replicate, because it was completely real. There was no corporate polish to it, no carefully managed messaging. Just a professional athlete who had fought her way back from a serious knee injury, gone out and physically dominated a preseason game against one of the best rosters in the league, and then celebrated it exactly the way she felt like celebrating it. This is the part of Sophie Cunningham's value that does not show up in the contract numbers or the plus-minus ratings. She is a genuinely compelling personality in a league that is desperately hungry for compelling personalities. The WNBA's massive viewership growth over the last 2 seasons has been driven in significant part by the authentic, unfiltered human stories that players like Cunningham bring to the game. Fans do not just want to watch basketball. They want to feel connected to the people playing it. Cunningham gives them that connection in a way that feels completely effortless, because it is completely effortless. She is not performing a character. She is not following a brand strategy. She plays hard, gets hit, hits back, wins, goes to her hotel room, and posts a TikTok about it. That authenticity is genuinely rare at the professional level. And for a franchise that is actively building the kind of dynasty culture that sustains long-term fan loyalty, having that personality in the locker room and on social media is an asset that goes far beyond anything the front office is currently paying her for. Here is where the conversation shifts from basketball analysis to something the FUM. Indiana Fever front office needs to be paying very close attention to right now, because the situation developing around Sophie Cunningham's contract is the kind of situation that franchise-building organizations cannot afford to let slip through their fingers. She is currently playing on a 1-year deal worth $665,000. For context, that number represents a significant discount relative to the value she is providing to this roster. She is protecting the league's most marketable player. She is changing opposing defensive game plans through her physical presence alone. She is generating viral social media content that extends the Fever's brand reach far beyond their existing fan base. And she is doing all of this while coming off a serious knee injury that would have given other franchises legitimate reasons to reduce their interest. The one-year structure of her deal means that when this season ends, she becomes available. And the franchises that will be circling are not small market rebuilding teams. Reports and rumors within WNBA circles have suggested that organizations like the Phoenix Mercury and the Las Vegas Aces have genuine interest in the kind of physical, high-energy presence that Cunningham brings. Both of those franchises have the roster flexibility and the financial motivation to make a compelling offer to a player who just proved her health and her competitive fire are completely intact. The Indiana Fever have two things working in their favor right now. Cunningham signed her current deal because she wanted to be here specifically. She did not chase the biggest available offer. She chose the mission. Cunningham, and that level of organizational loyalty is genuinely rare in a league where player movement is becoming increasingly aggressive and calculated. But loyalty has limits. And if the Fever front office allows this season to play out without beginning serious extension conversations, they risk sending an unintentional message to a player who has given this franchise everything she has, including 9 months of painful rehabilitation, that her contributions are not worth a long-term financial commitment. Every team on the Indiana Fever's schedule this season is going to feel Sophie Cunningham's presence. The question the front office needs to answer before the offseason arrives is whether they are going to make sure she is still on this roster when next season's schedule gets released. Here is what Saturday at the Barclays Center actually told us. Beyond the viral clips and the social media noise and the debate over Brianna Stewart's elbow, the Indiana Fever are not the same team that absorbed punishment quietly last season. They have an identity now. A physical, ferocious, unapologetic identity built around protecting their franchise player and daring anyone on the opposing roster to test that commitment. Sophie Cunningham did not just have a good preseason game. She sent a message to every team on Indiana's schedule that the blueprint teams used against Clark last season is no longer a viable strategy. The enforcer is back, the knee held up, the fire never left. What happens next depends on decisions being made in boardrooms rather than on basketball courts. Whether the Fever lock Cunningham up long-term, whether the rest of the league adjusts to her presence or keeps testing it, whether Clark's physical safety translates into the kind of dominant regular season performance that makes Indiana genuinely dangerous in the postseason. One preseason game does not answer all of those questions, but it answered the most important one. Sophie Cunningham is exactly who she has always been, and the WNBA is not ready for it.